Did you know that slavery in the United States was not abolished on the first Juneteenth? Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly, and today's video is all about the history of the holiday of Juneteenth and 10 popular myths that have grown up around it. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation, and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week. So make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. Juneteenth is an annual celebration of the end of chattel slavery in the United States, even though slavery was not abolished in June of 1865. Juneteenth commemorates the issuance of General Order No. 3 in Galveston, Texas, on the 19th of June, 1865, announcing the enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation, which had been issued on the 1st of January, 1863, a document that freed all slaves then held in the Confederate States, which were at war with the federal government. Since the Confederacy felt no obligation to pay attention to a proclamation from what they saw as a foreign and hostile government, the Emancipation Proclamation did not actually free any slaves when it was issued. Slaves were only freed once Union troops arrived in their area and they could make their way to their lines, or when the Union defeated the Confederacy in battle in a given territory. As the Union Army advanced, more and more slaveholders sent their slaves to Texas to keep them from escaping to the Union troops. And so by 1865, there were over 200,000 slaves being held in the state. The purpose of General Order No. 3 was to let the people of Texas know that since the war was over and the Union had won, all slaves were now free. But this doesn't mean that General Order No. 3 ended slavery in the United States. Juneteenth is celebrated on or around the 19th of June annually to commemorate the end of slavery, because in 1868, the Texas Supreme Court ruled that slavery was officially ended in that state on June 19, 1865, in order to settle legal disputes among slave owners who had refused to pay for slaves bought or rented in early 1865, since the people they had purchased were no longer slaves. The court's ruling applied only to Texas, not the United States as a whole, but as former slaves in Texas began to observe the 19th of June as Freedom Day, the observance spread to other states. The event began to be called Juneteenth beginning in the 1890s, and first appeared in print by that name in 1909. The name is a combination of June and 19th. In 2021, Juneteenth was declared a federal holiday in the United States when President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. At that time, several myths were repeated at celebrations, as they had been for years, which, although they don't detract from the holiday, do obscure its history. Some of these might seem harmless or trivial, but Juneteenth is too important to allow its history to be diluted by half-truths and myths. The purpose of this video is to clear up 10 of these fables. So let's get into the most popular and often repeated Juneteenth myths. This myth has been repeated in print, video, and in the speeches of politicians for years. General Order No. 3 did not end slavery in the United States on the 19th of June, 1865. Slavery was abolished by the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution on December 6, 1865. All General Order No. 3 did was to announce that the Emancipation Proclamation would now be enforced in Texas. General Order No. 3 reads: The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and that they will not be supported in idleness either, there or elsewhere. The order did not even actually end slavery in Texas on June 19, 1865, since it was only issued in Galveston, and didn't begin distribution until the next day. Many newspapers didn't report on the order until a week later. It was left to slave masters to tell their slaves they were free, and many refused or put it off until they were forced to. The preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was issued on September 22, 1862, and was published in full in the Houston, Texas newspaper, the Tri-Weekly Telegraph, on October 17, 1862, with other papers also reporting on it around the same time. Although slaves were purposely kept illiterate, they would have heard their masters discussing the proclamation or had it read to them. Evidence in the form of newspapers, correspondence between slaveholding parties, and later interviews with slaves makes clear that the people of Texas, slave and free, were aware of the Emancipation Proclamation over 2 years before General Granger issued General Order No. 3 in Galveston. The slaves in Texas were not working those 2 years in any kind of blithe ignorance. They knew the federal government had freed them, but enslaved in a Confederate state, there wasn't anything they could do about it. This myth is supposed to explain myth 2, which actually has a second part to it, that the people of Texas didn't know the war was over until June 19, 1865. According to this fable, a lone Union messenger was sent to Texas at some point with news of the Emancipation Proclamation, but was murdered by Confederate sympathizers before he could reach the state. This myth makes no sense at all. The Emancipation Proclamation had already been published in newspapers in Confederate territories in 1862. There was no need to send a messenger. And why would this messenger have been sent to Texas when the capital of the Confederacy was in Virginia? There would have been no reason to send a Union messenger across enemy lines to deliver a proclamation that the Confederacy could read in their own papers. And the people of Texas knew the war was over by late May or early June of 1865. They didn't need a courier to tell them. Texas was not the last slaveholding state in the United States. It was the last slaveholding state in the Confederacy. The border states of Delaware and Kentucky, and certain parishes of Louisiana, continued to hold slaves until the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution on December 6, 1865. This myth claims that Lincoln issued the order, or at least wrote it. But this would have been impossible since the order was issued on the 19th of June, 1865, and Lincoln had been assassinated on April 15th of that year, a little over 2 months before Granger issued it. General Order No. 3 was issued by Major General Francis J. Herron in Louisiana on June 3, 1865, copied by General Philip Sheridan, and given to General Gordon Granger to announce in Galveston. Granger assigned this duty to his subordinate, Major F.W. Emory. Lincoln had nothing to do with any of it. Ashton Villa was the home of the Confederate Colonel James Monroe Brown, had briefly served as the headquarters for Union troops when they took Galveston in 1862, and was the headquarters of the Confederate Army in the city once it had been retaken. It was a prominent building, and this maybe encouraged the myth that on the 19th of June, 1865, General Order No. 3 was publicly read from its balcony or front porch or yard. There is no evidence that General Order No. 3 was ever read publicly at all, while it is clear that it was officially issued from the Osterman Building, which served as the headquarters of the Union Army District of Texas in Galveston. A Texas state historical marker at the Osterman Building today commemorates the issuance of the order, which was then distributed via handbills, newspapers, telegraph, and word of mouth. It is probable that there were informal public readings of the order, but no record of Granger calling a public assembly for that or any other purpose on the 19th of June, 1865. This very popular myth claims that former slaves celebrated across Texas on the 19th of June, 1865, when the news was announced that slavery had been abolished. This would have been impossible because the order was issued in Galveston on that date and only in Galveston. Since there was no internet or television, there was no way to reach all of Texas with the news in a single day. General Order Number 3 was not distributed via telegraph until the next day, and many, if not most, newspapers didn't publish the news until a week later. Even many of the former slaves in Galveston didn't know they had been freed on the 19th of June because their masters didn't tell them. And even those who did know couldn't have celebrated publicly because General Granger prohibited public gatherings on the 19th of June, fearing public demonstrations and social unrest. The oldest celebration of emancipation in the United States is actually Watch Night, a vigil held by abolitionists and enclaves of slaves on the 31st of December 1862, in anticipation of the issuance of the official Emancipation Proclamation on the 1st of January 1863. This vigil was commemorated the following year, and continues to be a part of New Year's Eve celebrations in African American churches and communities today. The earliest Juneteenth celebration was called Freedom Day, and it seems all were welcome to participate, but soon after, it became an event focused on educating men on voting rights. Since slaves had been disenfranchised, they had never been able to vote. Freedom Day served as a voter education opportunity, and since women were not allowed to vote until 1920, their participation was discouraged. Women and children only seem to have begun participating in official Juneteenth events in large numbers after 1920, although advertisements in magazines and newspapers clearly aimed at women and referencing Juneteenth appear much earlier, suggesting informal Juneteenth gatherings they would have participated in. Although this myth adds some nice symmetry to the celebration of Juneteenth, the first Freedom Day was celebrated on the 1st of January 1866 to commemorate the 3-year anniversary of the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation. That year, another Freedom Day was observed in Galveston, Texas on the 19th of June, and this is often referenced as the first Juneteenth. But the term Juneteenth did not exist in 1866. The celebration of emancipation was known as Freedom Day. And the first Freedom Day was observed in January, not June, of 1866. As Juneteenth has received wider notice, myths like this one gain greater visibility and, with repetition, come to be regarded as historical fact. It doesn't seem that any of these myths were started maliciously or to purposely distort the history of Juneteenth. Scholar D.J. Norman Cox, who has written extensively on the subject in his book Juneteenth 101, Popular Myths and Forgotten Facts, believes many of these myths took hold simply because of poor fact-checking, and to set the record straight, you only have to look into the history of the event for yourself. What other Juneteenth myths have you heard? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos published every week. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. If you like my sweater, you can find this design and a bunch more in our shop at worldhistory.store, or you can find a link for it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon with another video.